thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you to everybody who's here. This is a very interesting topic, a topic that also leads with what we're doing today with our ventures. And I want to present Jennifer Neundorfer, Danilo Petranovich, and Sioma Waisburd, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, give you a sneak peek into what they do, what their current projects are, and what their trajectory has been. So let's start from the end. Jennifer, please, if you can introduce yourself to the whole team.
Great. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. As you heard, I'm Jen Neundorfer. I run an early stage venture firm called January Ventures. We invest primarily at the pre-seed and seed, so we are often first capital into very early stage software companies. We invest all in software companies, primarily in B2B companies that are bringing legacy industries up the digital curve. So we do a lot in supply chain and manufacturing, climate and energy transition, healthcare, fintech. Lots of things that are not very sexy, but where we see huge opportunity to introduce technology. And as I think about my trajectory, my first internship when I was in college was actually with a venture capitalist, but it took me a while to come to venture capital. I started my career on the West Coast as an operator. I loved startups, I loved company building, and spent much of my career at the intersection of media and technology. I was at YouTube in the early days, figuring out how we were going to make money and launch the first ad products there, which sometimes dates me in a room of people your age, because yes, there was a time when there were no ads on YouTube, and that was the work that we did. And then I ran M&A and business development at 21st Century Fox and basically launched all of our digital businesses from Hulu and the MySpace acquisition to digital sports nets, mobile broadcasting networks. And what I realized was that I loved, as I said, company building at the earliest stage. And I wanted to do that over and over and over. And I knew that I wasn't a founder myself. My husband is a founder. That's a different sort of DNA. But I moved over to the investing side to work with really talented founders and help them take an early idea through to a full business. And I think the thing that has motivated me in that work is just this sense that, and Danilo and I were talking about this, that the networks in venture capital are very narrow. But in my experience as an operator and a person in this world, I don't believe that innovation and talent are very narrow. And so the work that I do at January is really all about demystifying venture capital and expanding access to venture capital at the earliest stage.
Great. Good afternoon. Danilo, I'm honored to be here, and I'd like to thank Nicolás for the panel and Gonzalo Lira for the invitation. On my first time at Babson, and delighted to speak to you this afternoon. I'm maybe a bit of an oddball here because I'm what they call a social entrepreneur in your industry. I guess I work at a not-for-profit institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts, whose main mission is to be the university's best friend. So what do I mean by that? Our mission is to save and improve the university, especially in the humanities, especially as it concerns humanities and the social sciences. So I guess I'm technically not the founder, but I am the director and the second director of the institute. It started 10 years ago. I've been there for 9 years, so I feel like I've been running it since its inception. So I found the last couple of panels extremely resonant as far as things that I could apply in the not-for-profit space. 2 reasons for our founding, briefly. Number one, to expand the conversation at the modern university, again, especially in humanities and social sciences. Universities should deal with big questions and should be full of intellectually adventurous ideas, problems to solve. So we try to go big and bold. And I think that spirit is lacking these days. And the second idea, sometimes intention with this, is to make sure students, especially I'm speaking about undergrads, but this can apply, of course, to graduate students as well, make sure they read the big and important books while they're in college, while they have time, some seclusion, some solitude. There are some books that you should have read when you're in college, when you have time to go deep. I'm talking things like Shakespeare, Plato, somebody mentioned Homer, Abraham Lincoln, somebody I specialized in, his speeches, things of that sort. So old, good, important books. So I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Sioma Waisburd. I'm a proud Beaver. I graduated from Babson Beavers. I just went to like my daughters say, the merch shop, and bought them some merch. And I would have never imagined 15 years ago when I graduated that I would be going into that Babson store to find hoodies for my daughter. So very, very excited to be back here. And thank you, Gonzalo, and everybody putting this amazing program together, and for the invitation. It's truly an honor. And it's an honor also to be with my fellow panelists. And well, a little bit about my background. I graduated from Babson MBA 2010, and I'm from Mexico City. And all my life, I've been my professional career has been around CPG industry, consumer packaged goods, and branding. I'm passionate about branding and how brands speak and relate to the consumer, and specifically within wellness. Wellness has always been kind of like the underlying common denominator, and part of the purpose of what I do, talking about purpose. During my MBA, I started an ancient food company that actually was inspired from some travels to India, but also from books I read, talking about the importance of certain books that seem unrelated to business, but in my case, and I think it applies hopefully in other cases, are super related to what one does afterwards. And also what Michael talked about before, ancient philosophy ended up informing how I thought about ancient foods. And I started this project called Bringing Ancient Foods from Mexico to the United States during my MBA in Babson, that became Chosen Foods, which is the company I co-founded in 2010, and what I've done until recently. And now I'm still involved in Chosen Foods, not in the day-to-day. Now I also invest early stage CPG companies, and learning as I go as well.
Well, thank you for the introductions. And the first topic I want to start off with actually is with you, Sioma. And it's really regarding your story, how it all started. And it's how you integrated purpose into your daily activities, into your company's mission, and how that purpose actually led you to discovering avocado oil, as you were telling yesterday, the story of how that came to you. You know, you were looking at a catalog and this doesn't go with my purpose, this doesn't go with my purpose, this goes with my purpose. So how did that transform your whole mission and now your whole venture?
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. And I would say that before purpose is integrated to your business, to your startup, in my case, purpose was integrated into me as a person, as an entrepreneur, because as an entrepreneur, you don't have a company to start with. You think of an idea, you think of something that excites you, but it's not a company, it's you. And so the purpose needs to be integrated, and you have to integrate purpose within you that later turns into a company. And as I was driving today to Babson, I realized something that I had like seen before, but I kind of like it made sense now. One of the logo of Babson, besides beavers, of course, is a sailing ship. I don't know if you've realized that, like a big sailing ship. And it was clear to me, like embarking on a journey to start a company, it's like going out to the ocean and start sailing, but without a GPS. And it's just maybe the stars, and sometimes it's cloudy and you don't see where you're going, and sometimes you have other aspects. And purpose is that you're out in the ocean. If you don't have a purpose, you're gonna get lost, or you're gonna.
I have a question for Jennifer regarding this. So Jennifer, when you hear an entrepreneur talk like this as a venture capitalist, you know, about purpose and the mission, No, what
Getting
does that
lost.
make you feel? This is what we're looking for, right?
You know what? I appreciate the transparency because it's exactly right. And I think the one thing that I know when we're talking to an early stage founder, actually, the one thing I know about company building and company building at the early stage, and frankly, even at the public company stage, right, is it is a roller coaster. There are going to be high highs and low lows, and it is not going to be linear. Anytime you hear a founder, and particularly a successful founder, tell their story, they're going to tell it in a way that sounds very linear. But it never is, right? And, actually the one that I love talk about this is Brian Chesky from Airbnb. He is very honest about just how many times they almost went out of business and just how many times they had to reinvent themselves. And so, I love you saying like, hey, sometimes it's cloudy and your stars are gone and you're like, how do I get there? I think as I think about purpose and, I should say I am not an entrepreneur. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, but I did start a venture fund, which I will tell you for anyone in the room who wants to get into venture capital, there are many ways to do venture. Starting a fund is very gratifying, but it is not the easy way to get into venture. So it's its own journey in and of itself. And when I think about purpose for myself, I actually relate it back to something that Michael said on the last panel, which is around courage. And I think purpose gives oneself courage to go do something that is really hard and to go out and achieve something that may not be linear. You may not know exactly where you're going, but you know that it's worth getting there. And so in the moments when like my job feels hard or we're raising a fund and, something isn't going well, like it is coming back to that purpose that gives me and my team the motivation to keep going and achieve what we know we can achieve.
Now, Danilo, Jennifer just brought to light something very interesting that Michael did say in the last panel. And it was a question actually that came from the audience about courage. And today, when forming new generations from the Institute, when you're helping new professionals, they're going to go into this roller coaster of ups and downs. How do you see to prepare them or to help them sort through these battles that they're going to come through?
That's a great question, and thank you for weaving that in. We didn't practice this one. Yes. You hear me? Yeah. So I do think courage is a little bit of short supply, especially. So I'm originally from Montenegro, in former Yugoslavia. I grew up in Southern California, however. One thing that I noticed, and I've been in this education space for maybe a quarter century now, I think the students are a little too soft. And I'm not necessarily saying that about you or calling you out, just what I've seen, and mostly speaking about Harvard now, because they're super smart, super ambitious, but soft and overly worried about the future. And maybe because the expectations are high and you really got to do something special because the baseline seems to be taken care of for a lot of the students, or maybe so they think. So I try to push one line that I use about us and that I try to instill in my students is the spirit of intellectual adventure, which oftentimes includes other kinds of adventure. Go for it. I mean, really, really try to do something special and unique. I know it is, if you play your cards right, a lot of our undergraduates or business school students can easily get, I don't know how easily, but a solid consulting job, banking job, play it safe and do very well. Of course, they have to work hard to get it, but why don't you try a little bit more? Go for it. I mean, I'm trying not to be facetious about this, but I do think courage is in short supply. It's okay to fail sometimes. I mean, I wouldn't do it just for fun, but I would, or to think that there are no consequences to failure, because I think there are. I don't think you should do this lightly, but I do encourage our young people to try a little bit more, have a little richer imagination.
Well, and just to build on that concept of failure, because that's something that comes up a lot in our business, right? Because most startups fail. It's the reality. We say like our odds are like baseball, right? If like 3 out of 10 hit, that's actually Hall of Fame odds. And so I love this point about, not being afraid to fail. And one of the things that I often talk about is like, how do you reframe failure? There is one version of failure where it's like, you just didn't try hard, or you didn't show up, or like you made bad decisions. Like that's not a good way to fail. But to fail because you tried something really audacious. You gave it your all. You did all of the things and maybe it didn't work, but you learned about yourself. In my world, you learned about company building, team building, what it is that you're passionate about. Like those are ways that in my view, you are quote failing, but you are falling forward in your career, in your personal experience. And so I do, I love what you said about don't play it safe. We all have one life. I don't know. I think there are ways where, again, it may not lead to the outcome you set out, but if you can reframe about how is that then moving you forward in some way, it can be very powerful.
And to
A little
touch,
footnote, if I may, just very quickly, I think in your 20s especially,
Yeah.
I think it is certainly, you have a bit more of a leeway to experiment and try. You are a better entrepreneur. I've been told by my investors and partners really, more experience. Later on, you'll be better. You'll do it better in your 30s and 40s. So try, experiment a little more maybe in your 20s. Sorry about that.
And to just a follow to that point, I'm in my mid 40s. I keep failing very often, but I think I fail better. And that's why I wanted to share a couple of things regarding chosen foods that you asked, and regarding purpose. So when we started Chosen Foods, we started with chia seeds. And just after graduating, we put all our investment in chia seeds and we lost all our chia seeds. So that was a big failure for many reasons. But there's always, in our case, a silver lining and almost like a treasure trove and learnings from failures. But you have to look for that. It doesn't come to you. You have to look for that. Because we lost our chia, but we continue with the purpose of bringing ancient foods to the United States. We ended up discovering avocado oil that became our company. So that's one small example of failure and purpose and reaching our objective. But purpose also played a very important role, not only when you're doing bad and when you're failing, but also when you're doing good and when things are going your way. Because when you're doing good, meaning maybe you have revenues and also you have cash in the bank, everything's shiny. Like, oh, that's shiny, that's shiny, that's shiny. I want that. Let's launch this product. Let's do that. And we were an avocado company and we're like, let's do guacamole, of course. And we failed at guacamole. But we deviated from our purpose, but we realized that until we tried that out, but we tried it out because we were doing good and we lost touch with our purpose at that point. So purpose has been an underlying common denominator for when we're struggling, but also when we're doing good, and it keeps us in our mission.
Now, I want to bring it back to Jennifer and also following up on what Sioma just said. So when you have a pre-seed startup that you have taken on your portfolio, how do you keep them, honed on their purpose without deviating and looking at these shiny objects or these shiny projects that come along the way?
It's hard. And it's particularly hard at pre-seed because at pre-seed, you don't yet know like which version of your product is actually going to work. You may not even know which of the 10 customers you're talking to is going to be your target customer. And so there is a fair amount of experimentation that happens at pre-seed. And so that we really encourage. We need our companies to not just build in a vacuum, but actually take a product out and start testing it. You hear a lot about test and iterate, and that is like the focus of the pre-seed stage. But I think, to the question, it's a really good one. And I love that, yes, everything looks shiny. Every door is open at pre-seed. We really try to, almost work backwards with our companies. So when, to take a step back, when I hear an early stage pitch, the one thing that I know is that in success, something about that company is going to look different when they're very successful. And so what we do is sort of work our companies back. Here's your biggest vision. How do you bring that back to day one, step one? What do you need to do? And we actually get so detailed as to say, okay, if this is where you need to be in 2 years to raise your next round, how do we back this up to what you need to do month by month for the first 6 months? And then we meet every month to really make sure that as the company gets more information, we're jointly refining what that path forward looks like.
Now, this is an open question to all three of you. And in your experience, sticking with your purpose, when have you seen that has led to a very important decision you have made within your company? For example, you just shared your experience with the avocado oils. So maybe Danilo, Jennifer, which decision can you recall that that you made comes back to sticking with your purpose?
Take this first now.
Thank you. Excellent question. And maybe if I can add, maybe sticking with your purpose at maybe short-term cost or something along those lines. Yeah, I mean the not-for-profit world, maybe it's a little bit different. Of course, we also run on funds as well. It's not we don't work for free, but so it is. It's not maybe I don't know how many of you have worked at not-for-profit or tried it out or so. Okay, so quite a few, maybe a small minority, but a sizable minority. Yeah. So we do a lot of capacity building at Harvard. In other words, we seed fund programs at the university. So they involve a gift and maybe a sizable gift, and then the hope is that that program will then go on and succeed and then not require our funding anymore. So I guess we're kind of a VC in that way, though we don't quite think of it maybe in that way. So yeah, recently, maybe 3 years ago, we started one of the departments at Harvard, humanities departments at Harvard that's very successful, is the philosophy department. And yet they can be even more successful, we thought. So we are supporting them to teach innovative teaching in, of all things, this was the last couple of panels, ancient and medieval philosophy. So we did that and involved quite a chunk of the capital that we had. So it was very risky, and we're still waiting on results. So far, the indications are good, but it's always perhaps a little. You're always kind of stepping in the, you're walking into a dark room. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. So it's a little exciting too, but so I think we're seeing good results so far.
So I'll share one that maybe is a bit more of like how sticking with your purpose can pay off in somewhat unexpected ways. So I mentioned that at January, we're committed to demystifying venture capital. And there are a number of ways that we do that. Our core values are transparency and access. It's not what you typically think of when you think of a venture fund. And when we launched, people had a lot of questions. And what does that actually mean? And one of the things that we did early on, again, in this vein of transparency, was we did a study of early stage founders. And we surveyed, 500 to 1,000 early stage founders, and really dug into what is the sentiment of founders and what does company building look like at the early stage. There's a lot of PitchBook data and Crunchbase data that talks about trends across the capital continuum, but there's not a lot that focuses on pre-seed and seed because it's just hard to reach those founders and hard to track them. So we did this study 6 years ago and really did it for ourselves. It was like, we're about transparency. We're going to do this. This is our own voice of the customer. And one of our advisors pushed us to actually publish the research. She was like, just do the extra work, make it a report that you can put out there. And so we did. And that was 6 years ago. And we got a bit of press coverage that year. Well, fast forward 6 years, is now the largest longitudinal data set of early stage founders. We've done it every year since. It's been covered by TechCrunch, Fortune, Forbes. And more than that, it has become like a true calling card for us in the market. We raise capital on that. Like, people are always saying, what is your edge? Why do founders come to you? And like, it's become a real touchstone of something that differentiates us in the market with other co-investors, with founders, with people that we raise capital from. And so it's an example, I think, maybe to your point of these unexpected ways that sticking with your purpose can actually really benefit you in the long term.
And a quick story with Chosen Foods along these lines. Early on when we went with avocado oil, that really nobody was taking it in terms of retailers because it wasn't really understood to be a cooking oil. we wanted to create a brand. We didn't want to distribute an ingredient or product. We were about branding and creating something sexy and profitable based on ancient food. And one of the retailers before Costco that approached to us and said, we like your product, was actually the opposite of what we were targeting. It was a discount retail store that a lot of brands used to sell products that were about to expire or that they couldn't move. And it was not profitable or sexy to go there. But our mission that was driven by purpose was how can we impact the health of everybody in our community, not only those who shop in Whole Foods or more the natural chain, but those who might not afford Whole Foods and that go to these discount retail stores. And so we said yes, not because we just wanted the sales or because it was very easy to say no. Just to start with that retailer would maybe have been seen as harder to go into other retail stores. But our purpose drove us to say, okay, let's offer this product that we love to maybe a crowd that we didn't foresee to go in initially, maybe when we were bigger. And that proved the starting point for other retailers to get to know the product and the consumers to start trying our product. So those were decisions that were really driven by purpose, where if you only looked at economics or at the data or what all your competitors were doing, we would have never, ever taken that retailer to begin with.
So today we have seen how changes in technology and AI are shaping the future of business, how when you're launching a new venture, choosing your team and maybe friendship also helps. And now we're looking at the role of purpose. And I want to close with a question. You being a Babson grad and student and having launched your first idea out here in Olin in a scratch of paper, what advice can you give to a room full of future entrepreneurs, future leaders about remaining with purpose?
And with co-founders every day, I would maybe, out of so many things that we could talk about this topic, I would share the following. In my case, and I share this with other entrepreneurs and my co-founders, purpose sometimes screams, purpose sometimes speaks, and purpose sometimes whispers. And don't rely on only the screaming, because it's very easy when you go off route or of your values or your mission. Yes, you'll get that scream in many ways. We can talk about that, but it's very easy to hear that. But when it speaks, and especially when it whispers, pay attention to how that sounds. If there's other noise that would make the whispering be harder to listen, make sure that you know how to put off that noise. And I know that this is more metaphorically and not so specific, but I would just leave you with that and have yourselves do that exercise, because it's very personal, but make sure you also listen to the whispering.
Yeah, no, that's very good. I think we live in an age of choice and optionality and options, great options. It's so overwhelming at times. I see it in my students, I see it in myself. And for myself, I think it was more of a negative approach. And that, by what I mean by that is, what is it that you can't do without? That was my, how I thought of purpose, or I found the purpose. In other words, I wanted to be, in my case, around books in a place that's very intellectually intense. Cambridge fit that model very well. I always had a sense that I'll kind of be in this space, not exactly sure what I would be doing, maybe within the academy, maybe academy adjacent, maybe even more entrepreneurial. But it is kind of discovering, listening, yes, listening to yourself, but figuring out what is it that you can't live without. The labor of love is one expression sometimes that people use, so I can put it that way too.
Yeah, really good things to think about. I think what I would say is, don't view purpose at odds with making money. I think, and this comes up a bunch in our space, people will talk about impact funds. And while we are a fund that invests around impact, it's interesting, we don't call ourselves an impact fund because often that is seen as a concessionary strategy, that an impact fund is there for social returns, not for making money. And, I am a firm believer that you can be mission and purpose oriented and still make a ton of money. And look, I think, there are a lot of good examples up here. There's great examples from this conference today. I know many Babson entrepreneurs who have been wildly successful and are incredibly purpose driven. So I think earlier in my career, I felt like there were two poles, right? There were the people that, were going to go just into straight finance. And frankly, that didn't feel super purposeful, but it was really about maximizing earnings. And, purpose felt sort of less on that scale. And I think, in my experience now, many years out from school, I have seen that frankly, the people that have been most successful in my peer group are people that married purpose with a sense of capitalism and went after that. And so that would be my push to you, is that if you feel that whisper of a purpose, don't be afraid of it. And don't see it as zero sum with maybe, the financial ambitions that you have as well.
Along those lines, if we would have asked if we could make money at the beginning by selling avocado oil for cooking, they would have told us you're going to lose money. So it's definitely true.
Well, thank you very much. Let's open up the mic for some questions. We have time for 3 questions. So if anybody wants to ask something, please.
Thank you all for being here. My question is about courage, actually. We've talked about it already. And how would you define courage? And that's like for each one of you.
Gosh, that's such a good question. Like, how much time do we have to talk about courage? I guess I'll say what first comes to mind. It's certainly, I think part of it is not caring about what you should do or what you think other people think you should do, right? It's really the ability to listen to to know your gut, to listen to what your gut is saying, and to use that to go and do things that are hard, uncomfortable, all of that.
Yeah, no, that's a good big one. At the risk of being a pedant, I immediately what Aristotle says about courage, between being foolhardy and frightened or scared. It's a very good answer. Then you have to drill down. But in our context, and just to be very quick in the interest of time, and I can elaborate this later in a Q&A, just doing what's unpopular, especially when if you don't agree with the popular, right? I mean, if you agree with the popular, don't do it. But when you and let's see if you have, that's a good test of if you have courage, standing up for what's unpopular as you see it.
And totally agree with you guys. And something that I would add is that courage is not the absence of fear. It's not having fear. It's, I'm afraid of doing something, but I'm going to do it. And I'm going to embrace for whatever I fear that's going to come or I'm going to feel or it's going to happen. By doing it, it might come true. And then what I've realized is that facing those fears is less of an issue than having them. So it's not having the absence of fear. You can have courage with a lot of fear at the same time.
Hi, my name is Darielle. I'm an undergraduate first-year student here at Babson. This inquiry is open to either one of you all. When have you had to redefine your purpose or even reevaluate your purpose after facing obstacles within your businesses?
I'll jump on this grenade right away. And I'm very stubborn. I hate doing that. And maybe I'm just thinking about the last 9 years, never is the answer. Kind of even double down on the purpose. Now, in on the big purpose, the grand purpose of the call it intellectual reform along the lines I've outlined here, but all the time in terms of smaller projects and the auxiliary pieces of the business, I guess. Yeah, it's not pleasant revising and stepping back and then course correcting, recalibrating, but happens all the time. But I don't know, the big purpose, never thus far.
Yeah, I'd echo that. We haven't changed our purpose. I think we've gotten sharper on our purpose. So it's like, you know, at the beginning it was somewhat amorphous and now it's become much, we've been able to articulate it in a much clearer way. And that helps us then grow an organization and be able to hire people that are aligned with our purpose. One thing I will say, you know, part of our work in expanding the networks in venture capital is to bring more diverse founders into the fold. And that is a space that from a purpose lens is really under threat right now in the larger political environment. And one of the things that we have seen and we have thought about, we've seen it with our peers that are doing similar work, is how we talk about the work that we're doing. The purpose is the same, the work is still the same. And there is a bit of, you know, just everyone looking to say like, okay, are we talking about this in a way that continues to serve our purpose, but makes us not a target for whoever is out there thinking, you know, that is really anti our purpose?
Yeah, so in the not-for-profit world, every 6 months, this exercise, I should have said this right away. Every 6 months, I do this exercise, go through our core values, our mission, our vision. And the not-for-profit world, originally when we started doing this, it came as a tip from outside. I thought it was going to be, oh, give me a break. I got real work to do. Turns out it's extremely valuable. 6 months is a long time in the not-for-profit world. Things do change. You have to adjust. So that it does get sharpened, I think, from more inchoate or it becomes sharper, the purpose. And that's an incredible team building activity. It's a great way of aligning all of your staff and team members as well. So every 6 months, just what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What do we believe in?
And very much follow what you guys said. It's be passionate. We've been passionate with our purpose, but sometimes we've forgotten that, and we become passionate by a new brand or a new product, and that's where we inject passion. Like when we launched guacamole, like that, our purpose is to become the avocado company across the food segment. And what we realized is that we were being passionate about that new product or new brand that didn't work for us. So we realigned and we remembered through failures and recalibrations to come back and inject that passion to the purpose. So the purpose, which was to improve people's health through food, bring ancient food and move away from seed oils. And going back to the purpose, we did change and recalibrated what we did with products and brands and what we focused on and what we stopped doing. But kind of like along the lines that you guys said, we realized that we never ended changing our purpose, but our purpose ended up changing what we were doing along the way.
And one last thing I would say, because you said you're a first year in undergrad. So I started January when I was 37, something like that. Like I didn't know my purpose when I was in my first year of college. And so I think some of this is like also giving yourself time to, frankly, everyone in this room, right? To like, if your purpose is there, great. If you need a bit of time for that purpose to emerge, that's also great. I feel like I didn't know my purpose truly until, you know, my early to mid 30s.
Hi, my name is Udo. I'm an undergraduate and I'm also a first year. This question is for like any of the panels. So at any point in your business journey, did you feel that like your passion like overlined with like the quest for having like economic security, like in terms of like you want to create money, but like you know that this passion may not work. Like you could like this particular activity, but like you just want money quickly. Like at any point did you like feel that? Because for like most of the time it's like the main point of entering a business is to make money, regardless of whatever job there is, which actually like is the main story for most people. Like people who are afraid to like focus on this like one passion because like what is going to fail, what if like it's too common, just want the money quickly. So did you ever feel that sort of way at any point in time? And like if you did, like what would be like an advice you want to tell someone so that they could think like in a different like linear perspective?
I mean, I can give my first reaction, which is early in my career, I needed to make money. And I also didn't quite know what my purpose was. I was, really about like, how do I get a good salary quick? And so, I think I juxtapose all this by like, know where you are in your career progression. I think that to be an entrepreneur, it is very hard if you are not purpose driven because it's so hard. If you're going to go and work in a big company or a big firm, like maybe it's not about being purpose driven. It's about making some money so that in 5 years you can be purpose driven. And so you sort of need to line those things up. And I think figure out at what points in your career those two things come together where you can say like, oh, I can now make money and be purpose driven, and have that come together.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, kind of a dose of realism in the conversation. I would maybe give this advice. I think when you're young in your 20s, even more than money, of course you need some savings and a buffer and whatnot. Maybe not as much as you think, but still, you need a mentor. A mentor and early, and that acquiring a good and you can't. Sometimes it's good fortune, but you can be more proactive. I wish I was more proactive in my 20s in college and after college and in my 30s even. Find a good mentor, and then that you're going to benefit from that for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. And very insightful points because it's a very, very difficult topic. Very difficult topic. When we started Chosen Foods, I was relying on my savings from my previous job. In my previous job, my main purpose was to make money. I mean, but it wasn't purpose driven. It was like out of college and I wanted to start making money, and that enabled me to have savings to start the business. Because when you actually are an entrepreneur and you're purpose driven, it's like, and I think it's a great practice for any entrepreneur, is to plant seeds, whether it's your kitchen, in your garden, whatever, and take time to have those seeds, watch them grow and not happen nothing for for a time, and then they start growing. And that the timing between starting something and having receiving or seeing the economic impact or making money, there's a time lag, and it's tough, and you need to prepare for that. And a mentor, definitely, it's a great tool, and keeping that purpose, being responsible with having a plan, whether it's savings or investors that come away. But it's definitely a challenging reality for an entrepreneur, because it doesn't come like a job. A job, you start working and maybe signing bonus, or after the first month, you start seeing the money come in. And that doesn't happen with a startup. So you have to be patient, you have to be purposeful, and have a plan.
Well, Jennifer, Danilo, Sioma, thank you very much for participating today. Please, let's welcome them.
Thank you, everybody.
And we have some presents for you from the team at Gel. They're going to bring them over. And if this is a conversation that sparked some interest or made you think differently, please be sure to share with someone else and make a conversation of it.